you for joining today's webinar. And today's webinar subject is QuickBooks Online for Nonprofits. My name is John Ripple, and I am a Canton SCORE volunteer. For those that are not familiar with SCORE, SCORE is a nonprofit that's been around since 1964 and is a resource partner of the SBA, which is the Small Business Administration. SCORE has helped more than 17 million entrepreneurs start, grow, or successfully exit a business. SCORE's mission is to foster vibrant small business communities through mentoring and education. There are over 240 chapters across the United States with over 10,000 volunteers. SCORE offers counseling that is free of charge and confidential to both for-profit and nonprofit businesses, as well as host workshops and webinars like the one today. Pictured on the screen is the contact information for the Canton SCORE chapter. For those that are outside this area, I encourage you to reach out to SCORE in your local area to get some help if needed. So a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have questions during the webinar, we'd really appreciate it if you would type in your question in the Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen, and our presenter will address those questions throughout the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. You will receive a link after the webinar is concluded, so you can actually go back and review the webinar at your convenience. With that, let's get started. So today's presenter, as in the past several weeks, is Ann Sharp. So Ann, the platform is yours.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to focus on nonprofits specifically. We're going to play in your portal. We're going to use your terminology. And so I want to go over what our table of contents are. So we're going to show you the QuickBooks nonprofit packages, which I actually did not send out PowerPoints specifically because I was still making edits as of 8:30 this morning for this training seminar, as there were some updates I think we can make. So you guys will get the PowerPoints at the end of the session today. When you get the recordings, they'll be emailed out. But some of the things on these PowerPoints are actual links to videos that will help you and URLs to get to the actual proper websites and things like that. So when we're looking at the nonprofit package options, it will be a specific site that Intuit has created for the nonprofits, not just going to the normal site like we did before. We're going to look at our dashboard. We're going to talk more in detail about budgets. We briefly talk about budgets in class 3, but obviously nonprofits are my big majority guys that are using the budgets. So we want to look at the reporting options that happen there. We'll talk about some of the reports, what they're called, how to use them. And then we're going to look at, there's a book review portion of it if you're in the accountant portion. Connecting income software such as Donor Perfect. Everything tells you they integrate, but there's a lot of manual labor going into some of that. Some miscellaneous tools. There's a tax prep process in here. We're going to go over one way I have found from experience to do some grant tracking inside of QuickBooks, and then the important usage of classes and why you can use them for functionality purposes as a nonprofit. So again, today's class is totally to be around the needs of nonprofits and playing around in the portal that has all the verbiage of a nonprofit and all the bells and whistles of a nonprofit. So on this next screen is the, again, one of the links. Oops. Let's see here. One of the links I told you that will be like attached inside your PowerPoint when you guys get it at the end of the session. And again, this is just because it can be a site that can be hard to find. And again, I'm just a Chrome user. That's my personal preference. If you use a Mac, you can use Safari. If you like the Microsoft Edge, that's totally fine too. So I just put it into my search engine bar, and obviously it brings me to my nonprofit page that QuickBooks has that tells you all the fun stuff about the accounting software, syncing your bank account, all the donation stuff, and then it goes into more detail about the reporting. And then at the very, very, very bottom, you can see there are their nonprofit options, okay? And then Unlike QuickBooks Online regular, there's only two options. They are discounted substantially for 3 months because they're usually doing a promo, but you have an access to a lot more things in this package than you do the middle of the road package of QuickBooks. And then obviously the advanced same goes here. Now, I always get asked questions of, can you get a different discount if you don't buy it through Intuit and you do it through TechSoup? Those of you that know what TechSoup is, it's obviously a provider that sells you guys discounted office subscriptions and some of those types of things as well. I don't know if they do QuickBooks Online and have that discount. I do know they do desktop and have the discounts there. So that would be something you would have to reach out to TechSoup for, because the nonprofit QuickBooks Online is a newer system. This is our only the second seminar we're running on teaching it, because it just came out a couple years ago. And so people are just now starting to get in and implement it, because obviously desktop is becoming so expensive that this is the cheaper option. Okay. So for training purposes today, we're going to buy the $49.50 package for 3 months. Normally would be $99. It has all of these features that we're going to look at. So cash flow management, bill management's a big one. If you use inventory, it's not great at inventory, but it's here. The project profitability, budgeting, all those types of things are in this. So we're going to go ahead and click buy now. Now, instead of creating another email and password, I'm just going to click sign in because I obviously have an account. There we go. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen just long enough to put in my credit card information for us, because you guys don't need to see that. This is obviously the payment form that you would use that would be billed each month. So you'll get charged today, the first dollar amount, and then you'll be charged 30 days after that. And then obviously every 30 days from there forward. So
And you do have a couple questions. One's from Sherry about transferring traditional to online, I think, and the other one has to do with tax exempt letter. So I just
okay,
thought,
perfect.
okay, all right.
Awesome. I will take a peek at that as soon as we get our subscription set up here. And I'll go back to sharing my screen because it's loading now for you guys. And then obviously you're going to go through their welcome wizard in this process. And then again, for QuickBooks training purposes, we're going to do nonprofit training. It's going to be our business name, but obviously it would be your legal name. And then you can tell it your industries. So let's see here. And again, it's just walking you through the wizard. So nothing exciting. And I don't want to schedule a call because I don't need to talk to an expert about anything. And we're going to skip all of this stuff for now. And then now it's ready for you to actually start working inside of. Okay. And you'll see it updated. My company name is going to show and all of that stuff. Okay, so let me look in the Q&A since we finished, just signing up for QuickBooks. That was our first thing, was looking at the packages and picking one that best fits us. This is the one that best fits us because it's obviously the basic one that's going to cover all the features we're going to cover today. And then we can, if you needed more additional things after that, then you could look at the second option. All right, so in Q&A, it says, can you transfer from traditional QuickBooks products to this new product? Sherry, yes, you can. If you're in desktop, you just would have to port the data up, and you would do that from inside of desktop. If you're on traditional QuickBooks Online and you want to go to the nonprofit online, you actually have to work with their support team to get that transition to happen for you. Because QuickBooks Online doesn't have an export button of data that's not just reports and actually the file without working with Intuit for it. Anna said, our organization does not have the 501c3 tax exempt letter from the IRS. Are these prices valid even if the tax exempt determination letter has not been received? I wouldn't see why not. I don't know. They obviously didn't ask us for that information when we signed up. So I don't think that it would matter. Obviously, if you're working with another organization like TechSoup or something like that, they probably have some validation process, but QuickBooks is getting, money from you for a subscription, whether you're a regular QuickBooks subscription or in the nonprofit. So I don't see that that would be an issue. And obviously you're in the process of getting that letter. So I don't see any issue there, Anne. So it says, what is the difference between QuickBooks Payroll versus QuickBooks Nonprofit? Well, QuickBooks Payroll is a payroll part of QuickBooks, which we don't actually teach. And QuickBooks Nonprofit is the actual software itself. It's not just a piece of it, which would be payroll. It obviously has payroll in the nonprofit. But the big difference is that you get more bells and whistles for less money as a nonprofit, and your terminology inside of here. So instead of um, it saying customers, it would say donors. Instead of saying profit and loss, it may say, statement of cash flows and things like that. So it's a difference in the terminology. Latoya says, is there an accountant portal as well, or will we use the same system? Yes, there is an accountant portal, and we do get into that. Okay, so we're going to move on. So the next thing we want to talk about is our dashboard. So as you'll see, our dashboard does look similar to the dashboard of regular QuickBooks Online. And again, we have no data in here as we're going to work through that stuff today. And so our portal here just has empty things. Like we haven't linked our bank account yet. We have no profit and loss yet. We have no expenses. And again, you can still customize your dashboard by clicking on it and then telling it you want stuff moved around, you want stuff deleted, any of those types of things, obviously, or you can leave it the way it is and start it to let it populate. That's kind of a preference on you guys individually. Again, you still have your little gear icon here in the top corner that has a bunch of navigation stuff. You still have the one over here that has a bunch of navigation stuff. So you still have all the features that you've talked about in the past. It's just, looks similar. Some names are different, some names are not. Okay. And again, you will see that we have about the same access as we had in the last training class to be able to implement classes, locations. Obviously, some of us use account numbers, so you would have that information that you would need to turn on. There's a bunch of options there for some of that, and we will get into a bunch of it, okay? So the next thing we kind of want to talk about is just getting comfortable with the widgets that we've used in the past. Okay, so if we get up into the gear icon here, manage users. So you'll see you have main users and you have accounting firms. And so I'm going to go ahead and invite an accounting firm. And that way we can then see the accountant portal, as there is a difference. And of course, for security purposes, it wants to send a code. So let me grab my phone. see here. Hasn't come through yet, but so I should get an email to my email because I invited myself. That will tell me that I have been invited into the QuickBooks. So here's the invite now. So obviously I would need to accept this invite. Well, they're having an error, so we'll come back to that then. But obviously then once this refreshes, because you accept the invite, then instead of saying invited, it should say that you've been active. And then again, you can add users, and you have up to 5 users in this plan. So 5 users, and then you can do 2 accounting firms. So for those of you that ask, you do still get that. Okay. One of the other things we're going to work around in here is accounts and settings. So again, inside of here, you can edit any of this information. The more information you fill out when you set up the system itself, the more information that's here for you for later down the road, unless that you have to edit. But obviously you have the ability to edit. If you look at expenses here, obviously we have the ability to turn on purchase orders. You have the ability to track expenses if you want. If you go down to advanced, then you have the ability to change your fiscal year. So some of us might not be, January through December. Some of us might be different. And then obviously you can tell them what type of counting method you are, cash or accrual. That's just going to help you with everything. Big thing down here we're going to need to turn on is classes and locations. And then as you can see, it warns, you can tell it to warn you if it's not assigned to a class. Or you can tell it not to, that's up to you. This is a feature people like, so they remember to put the classes in. So those are big things that we'll need in order to set up our QuickBooks the way we're going to talk about it today. And then if you are bringing in any lists of items, things like that, because you're building something totally new or you need to import customers or those types of things, you would use your import tools here. Okay. So big thing, manage users is going to be the biggest thing we use as accountants. People come and go in nonprofits. You need to get people access to things, accountants, those types of people. And then obviously we set up classes. We might use numbers for our chart of accounts. Those types of things are all set up through the accountant settings. Okay. And then your subscription and billing. So if you need to upgrade because you need more features or you need, you want to stay where you're at, you have that here. If you wanted to turn on it, processing to take payments through QuickBooks, that's how you would do it through your subscription. Again, if you decided to do payroll that we don't really talk about, you would do that through subscriptions as well. Okay. So let's talk about some questions before we dive into the next section here. So Stephanie says, if I have regular QuickBooks, can we switch to nonprofit? The answer is yes. You would just need to get with Intuit in order to make that transition. The second question up here was, if I have regular QuickBooks, can we migrate to QuickBooks Nonprofit? Again, the answer is yes. You guys just have to work with Intuit to make that transition. Okay, so now let's talk about budgets. Okay, so budgets is a big one. Obviously, most of us in nonprofit world create budgets in Excel sheets, and then we do reports to tie through to budgets. I've seen some pretty elaborate items. Well, QuickBooks Online, not only nonprofit, but regular QuickBooks has the budget feature if you're in the proper package. And you can import a budget or create a budget. For training purposes today, we're going to create a budget, okay? And then you can tell it if you want it to be off of the profit and loss or the balance sheet, consolidated or subdivided, and if you want it to pre-fill data for whatever the period is, okay? So if I say I want it to pre-fill data for 2024, then I can go ahead and hit next, and it's going to start preparing my budget, okay? Now, the only thing you're going to see in here are the accounts right now that QuickBooks has already created for me, because I haven't created any accounts in here, right? We haven't put any data in this software yet. So these are all the general accounts that QuickBooks thinks that everybody should have and everybody will use. So they're already in here. Okay. So you would want to look at this list and obviously compare to the ones that you would be using on your budget. If they're already here, you wouldn't need to add that into your chart of accounts. Now, they have a specific way where you can do a total of $10,000 and it's going to divide it over X amount of months, 12 months, or you can not have this total here and go through and do it by trends. So say you want to make this 1,500, 2,500, and then 45 or 9,500, 4,500, and so on and so on. And then it will give you a total here, but it will be personalized by month. So if you're going to do this, then obviously this is something that you're working on individually, and you can do it. So sometimes people are like, I don't want it to just be divided by 12 because we don't get grants all 12 months out of the year. We get grants one specific quarter of the year. So you want it to be accurate in some of those buckets. Some buckets, overhead expenses might not matter whatsoever. So it just depends on what you're trying to do to make sure you plan it out properly. So once you've built the budget, then it will actually show you what you've actually spent against the budget here in this column. Now, again, we have no data in here, so these numbers are 0. Biggest question I get is, well, what if I don't use all these expenses? Can I get them out of my budget? Sadly, QuickBooks has not made it where you can delete a line. I don't know why. Don't ask me. So no matter whether you use it all the time or don't use it, it will show. Now you can use budgets for projects in here. So you can have as many of these created as you want. So if I hit save and ignore the wizard, and then I'm going to hit save and close. Now I have a list. So if you're doing budgets for specific campaigns you might be running as a nonprofit, or specific programs you might be running as a nonprofit, you have the ability to do budgets for those individual things. Sometimes I talk to them and they're like, well, we have a main budget and then we have sub budgets for certain major campaigns or programs they run throughout the year. Like their biggest fundraiser might be one. Okay. So you could have individual budgets for that. And then you can also have your annual budget. This is beneficial because as you're categorizing things, again, you can see where you're at year to date against your budget. And then when you're doing your budget for the following year, you can copy that budget and edit it appropriately based on changes, inflation, salary increases, additional funding, whatever the list might be. So the work becomes less intensive after you've created it at least once. Okay. And you can do a couple things. So you can run reports. Again, we're not going to see much of anything in these reports yet, but I know a lot of the boards that I talk to are like, we want our financial people just to be able to run reports very easily so that it's not a huge deal. So you can see that you can run reports and show it by every time frame you would want to see. So if your board only wants to see the month that you're, reporting to them, then you can do that. If you're looking to see annual, quarterly, whatever it is, you can change the time frame here. Counting method, cash or accrual, and then you can filter what's displayed or not. And again, you can export this to Excel. And obviously then adjust as needed. So if you wanted to delete those empty rows based on what you were trying to do, the empty rows really will play into to a lot of things. If you're doing only a specific project, that you would probably have a bunch of empty rows if you know you're only going to use like 3 or 4 buckets for that project. Okay. So yeah, so you have that ability to see some of that stuff. You can go back. And because we were in a report bucket, it took us back to reports when we hit back, but obviously we're playing around here. Okay. If you import the budget, you just have to map it. So if you click import, it's going to ask you the same types of things. You hit next, and then you would upload the actual attachment from something you have in here. Okay. And then from there, it's going to have additional items for you to say column 1 is this, column 2 is this, and so on, so that it knows how to put the data in. I encourage to do the import with the budgets as long as you've already got your chart of accounts running, meaning that all the items that are showing on your budget line items, as far as categories where things go, payroll expense, office supplies, program costs, grant expenditures, so on, then it will import very easily. If you don't have all that data set up, the import can be hard. Okay. And then obviously you can hide budgets once you're done with them. archive, you can duplicate it again if you want to edit it, you can view and edit, and you can delete it if you just decide this portal is just not for you. Okay. I really like this feature. It makes it a lot easier for doing the next year's budget because it's easy for them to see why we made the adjustments, either because we went over in an area or we went under in an area. It just depends on what you're trying to accomplish there with whomever you're having the conversation with. And then I like that it fingerprints who's made the edits to the actual budget. So whether it's you, your accountant, your executive director, or if you have an events coordinator or programs manager, you know, the list goes on there on who can have access to this information based on their settings inside of QuickBooks as a user. Okay. So it looks like we have a couple more questions. So let's look at our questions here. So it says, Anne says, do we need to choose a company type equals nonprofit organization during setup, and the system will generate the information for the tax form 990? The answer to that is no. QuickBooks is not a tax software. They will generate a profit and loss and balance sheet that then an accountant would need to implement into the 990, but it will not actually create a 990 for you. What is the latest year of QuickBooks Desktop that can be imported to QuickBooks Online? Ooh, very good question. I'm not sure, to be honest. Most of the time for data security purposes, I tend to jump the file, meaning like if you started in 2012 QuickBooks, I'll jump you to 2015, 2018, and then 2023 before I try to port you into online. But I would assume it would probably be the last year that they're servicing the QuickBooks. So as you know, they start to shut off features and tell you there's no support for that QuickBooks. And I would venture to bet, I think that that is like 2022 right now. So yeah, for data safety, I would recommend working with an IT firm or something when you're doing that transition, or working directly with QuickBooks to see what they think you would need to do in order to do that if you're in an older version. Stephanie says, do the project budgets feed into the regular budget? No. So if you create an individual budget here that's for a project, um, it it would not feed into the major fiscal year budget. It would be its own little section. Again, you would have to tell the expenses to go to that specific project. So it would only do things that probably were in that account line when you're looking at the stuff you're entering for expenses to tie into the budget for the actual number, but it doesn't play into the main budget. It would be like two separate pieces. Any other questions about budgets right now? Okay, perfect. So let's go into looking at some reports in here. So it looks like, you know what, I'm actually going to log out and log back in because this doesn't look like the nonprofit portal, even though obviously you guys saw we definitely bought the nonprofit portal. It's still showing the terminology as a regular one. So let me see if logging out and giving it a minute to set itself up helps that. Nope, it's just not going to do it for me. So normally when you look at this report here, it doesn't say balance sheet. It says the financial activity, and then, you know, this doesn't normally say P&L. It normally specifically says your guys' terminology. And I believe in my PowerPoint, I'm like 99% sure that it has it there for you. I'm looking at my PowerPoint right now for you guys to make sure. Yeah, so the balance sheet doesn't say balance sheet, it says statement of financial position, and then the P&L says statement of activity. So I don't know if this is just because we're signing up and we don't have any data in here yet, and if this will change, or if they're trying to make it more. But usually, like I said, the nonprofit portal, it doesn't say It might say sales, but it doesn't say customers, it says donors. So like a lot of this is not, or instead of invoices, it says pledges. Some of this doesn't look like it should look, and I don't know why, because you guys saw we went to the nonprofit page and bought it, but we'll work with it. So I'll kind of flip back and forth between that terminology there for you. Obviously, there are reports that never change in name, like receivables. That's all normal. But obviously, when you look at balance sheet, so statement of financial position, and then the statement of activity, you would want to look and see what's going on. So if I pull up this report right now, we have nothing in. So let's go ahead and put some stuff in so that I can show you the difference in how some of these reports can look. So as far as entering data into QuickBooks, you integrate accounts the same way we've done on all our trainings prior. You just connect the account. Again, the whole purpose of QuickBooks Online is the integration feature. So we want to make sure that we have that set up properly. And you just kind of go through the wizard of doing this. So I'm going to click here. And I use password software, so that's why this stuff is remembered. Obviously, it's not something that you have to do. This is just something I choose to do. You're authorizing through the credit Capital One that I want to be able to integrate with QuickBooks. Sometimes you have to do that inside of your actual bank portal or credit card portal. Sometimes you can do it from here. It's telling me it's a credit card, which is correct, and it's telling me I can go back as far as 6/29. So we're going to go ahead and connect it that far back. Now, times that you can't integrate with QuickBooks is if you have a key fob or a token that you need, that's not something that integrates into QuickBooks, but you can import the data manually to still have the integration feature. And I do that with some of the guys that we manage on a weekly basis, so that you can still see everything here and make sure you're categorizing and tying stuff through versus having to do manual entry every time. It just depends on how many transactions you have that are just like swiping a card transactions versus cutting a check or using a bill pay system. That would tell you if this is a feature that you want to do or if the manual entry is very little. Okay. But again, QuickBooks Online, the whole point is the integration feature so that data's here, can go against the budget, can create these projects, those types of things. So categorizing is no different in nonprofit, just like it is in normal QuickBooks. So I'm just going to select a couple things and get them categorized so we can see some stuff in reports. And then let's do this one, and we're going to say this is. And then let's see if we can find something that would look. Well, it's okay. We'll work with this. Okay, so if we go back to our reports tab here, now you have multiple ways to look at the data. You can look at the data as a whole, meaning that it just has the expenses you listed here. You can then change this data to show by classes or location. We set up classes just briefly in this training. Okay. And your classes here then can be if you're watching your main buckets. So main buckets could be programs, grants, admin, support. Those would be things that nonprofits tend to watch. They tend to watch how much time they're spending in admin cost-wise because it's really scrutinized in the nonprofit world. They might be looking at the programs or activities that they're running to make sure that they're collecting enough money to come in to pay for those. Grants is obviously something we're always managing to make sure we're getting enough money in. We're making sure we're getting the grants year after year if you can, and then obviously hoping that that bucket grows. And then spending that money appropriately into the grants. So I just created two of the four we kind of talked about. So admin, and I threw like an office supplies expense in there. Programs, I threw in like we went out to eat for one of the programs. And then you have this ugly guy here that says not specified. So if you don't classify a transaction, it sticks out in this column, which is like a no-no when you look at reports, because this should be tied somewhere. Okay. Now it could be a different name than admin programs. Again, we went over more and more. So you can use classes for those broad items. You can use subclasses to make it even more detailed. So under programs, maybe you have your specific items you run through each year. So one of my clients has a walk they do. They have a health fair they do. They have a fall fundraiser, which is like a gala that they're going to do. So under programs, they would have those 3 subcategories, which gives them more detail on the individual programs, but then can give me a total on the major program. So you can use classes to try to see what your cost is on each area of the nonprofit, pending what you're doing. Okay. Now, can you make your class list like astronomical? Absolutely. So if you go to your gear icon here and we want to go to all lists, this is where you would find your class list and you can make edits, okay, and create new, and you can import and do all these types of things. So if I wanted to create a new project and I wanted to say this was the walk, I can make it a subclass of programs, like I told you. So now you'll see it's indented here. Okay, so I can run a general report for programs, or I can run just this report for the walk. Okay. Now you can get in the weeds by getting way too much detail here if you're not careful. Okay. So keep that in mind. Sometimes for grant tracking purposes, we're going to talk about a couple ways to do grant tracking. You can use classes to track the grants as well. You could name the class the name of the grant. Okay. So if you click here and you say that you got a state grant, okay, then that could be one of your classes. If you say you have a federal grant, oh, federal grant, okay. Now, if you get more than one state grant, then you would have sub accounts of that state grant named Foundation of Ohio. I'm just throwing out random information, by the way. I don't know all the grants in the world. For a federal grant, it could be the ODJFS grant, you know, and then obviously you could name it the fiscal year you're working in as well. But you couldn't, if you get more than one of these items, then obviously you have to create additional items there. Okay. If you have so much grant funding going on and you're doing a lot of fundraising, then it's not always the easiest to do it by class, because now your reports are getting massive. So I'll go back into our transactions here and I'm going to select just random transactions that mean nothing, but just to put them in all these different classes so you guys can see what that does at your reports. So we've used them all. So then if I go back to my reports and I pull my P&L by class, see how large this report is getting very quickly. Okay. So you want to be strategic about the things that you're really trying to monitor when it comes to classes, because this report gets really large. Okay. Now, downfall of this is that when you're doing your budget is not going to show the classes in the budget report. Okay. So there's a downfall to using classes and locations because the budget report doesn't show it. Okay. But nonprofits have to be able to track the money being spent by certain grants. And most executive directors are trying to figure out if they have any money left. So this is a way for them to see that internally without doing this information elsewhere. But again, if you get too in the weeds, too detailed, it could become a very massive report. Okay. It looks like we have a couple questions. So let me answer these questions and then I'll show you the other way that you can track grants as well. JB says, how do you set up a budget for different projects? You just go into the budget area and create a new budget for the new project you're trying to do. And then you only fill out the buckets that you need for that specific project. So Danette says, is the profit and loss by tags the same thing? I can't find a profit and loss. You can use tags to show the information in a similar way, yes, and you can pull tags reports, but there is no warning to remind you to tag. So there's catches and not. And if you can't find the profit and loss, you're probably looking for a statement of activities would be your profit and loss. Jessica asked the same thing. Could tags also be used as classes? Yes, they can be. Tags has been the thing that people have used because they didn't want to upgrade the subscription to have a subscription with the classes because it's the more expensive subscription. Mackenzie said, can you define some of the key terms? Class, subclass. So a class is a category that you're creating that you want to put income and expenses in that will show you in a column, not a row. Okay, so a column. All right. A subclass means that that class is within another class. So the main class would be programs, my subclass would be walk. I'm trying to determine of the programs I run, how much did I make on my biggest fundraiser, which was my walk. Okay. So if you look at my screen here, it shows you programs, then it shows you walks, and then it has a total program column. Okay, so I can see that subclass detail, but then I also can still see my total program detail. So Robert says, how do locations interact with class? So when you look at a transaction, you can turn both on. So you can tell it that if you own more than one building, you want to select the location in which the work was done. And then you would use a class to categorize it based on the expense class you're trying to categorize. But then the location plays into when you're trying to determine if that location generates enough money for you, if it's profitable, and if you're going to owe taxes to it. So they go hand in hand. I don't use locations a lot because I don't have multiple locations, and most places I work with don't. But usually when you talk to an accountant, we tell you to turn on both features just in case you needed it. So Anne says that the annual tax return must show all expenses in a column by their functional category. So an expense report is needed with 4 columns: admin expense, program, fundraising expense, and then total expense. What's the best way to set this up in QuickBooks to generate it? You can do those by admin expense, program expense, okay? And then you would have fundraising expense, and total expenses, your total column is here, okay? So you could do it by classes. You could also do it by groupings in your chart of accounts, where you group all fundraising income, all fundraising expenses, and then, programs and so on and so on. So there's 2 ways to do that. And one, you could do again with classes or tags. Everybody seems to be asking about tags. Or you could do it from inside of your chart of accounts. If you go into your chart of accounts here, and I'll just edit one for purposes here. Like if I hit edit, you can make everything that would go under fundraising a sub account of fundraising, which we don't have created, but you would create it. Okay. And then you would see on your P&L everything grouped together fundraising wise. So if I go back to my reports, go back to my statement of activity. So where it says expense here, and it would say fundraising, and then everything listed underneath it as a sub account would be all the fundraising expense. Fundraising, advertising, the supplies, if you have meals, taxes. These are just examples, but you could build it this way as well instead of building it long ways. That would be a preference to you. Okay, so then the second way that we really talk about tracking grants is to create grants as customers. The reason for that is that we can tie then the deposits from the grants to this customer, and then we can put expenses against the customer. So my customer name would be Akron Foundation Grant, okay? You can fill out any other information you would need. I'm not going to fill any of it out today for training purposes. So then now I have a customer. So then now I can say a new transaction, and I can say that we received a payment from this customer. You know what? Let's do a sales receipt because I don't want it to say that there's a huge credit. Okay. So again, here's where tags are located that people tend to use if they don't want to use classes. Here's location if you're trying to track where you're at, and then your class bucket is down here, okay? So we can say 2024 funding for grant. Okay, some grants are reimbursement grants, so you would have a lot more detail here. But we want to do that, and then we're going to say the rate. So this is a $5,000 grant that we got, and then now this would go under grant. I'm going to actually call it Akron Foundation Grant. Okay, is my class, and that's because I want the detail of that specific grant. Okay, and now I can hit save and close. So if I go back into my customers, you'll see my Akron Foundation is there, and I can click on it, and you can see the history that it's paid. Okay. You are able to pull statements and projects by this customer. Okay. So you could track grants through projects. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it can be done. Okay. And then obviously, if I need a new transaction, then I can do it as, you know what, actually, let's go back over here to transactions and then go back to my bank transactions. And if I click to open one of these, vendor/customer, so I could type in my customer. And then this is going to be under the Akron grant. And then we could say it's office supplies. And then now go back into our customer, and it should show. Well, it normally it should show right here, but you can pull this report by this customer and see everything tied to that grant. Okay. Now, in the PowerPoint, I attached a link to a YouTube video for a gentleman that is a CPA that specializes in nonprofits. And he tells you how to pull the reports and obviously to do the grant tracking with making grants customers and then tying everything through to that customer or donor as it should be listed in your QuickBooks. So you can track the grants that way. This is the way I'm seeing that my latest client is doing, and it seems to be working really well. The only issue we have is that it's not the easiest to pull just the grants out of a P&L report. And so I watched this training video again with this guy because this is how we came up with tracking the grants this way. And he goes into detail how you can pull just the specific customer that you're looking for and get all the expenses by that grant. Now, then you would have to take that snippet data, meaning if you have more than one grant, you have to take all the individual pulls for that grant and put it into a master sheet. So there's some manual data there, but this is the best way that I think to track it versus doing the classifications. Because if you get funding each year and the grant funding might be different and you're trying to keep track of calendar year, you're going to have classes and you're going to get capped by the number of classes you can have or number of, I don't think there's a limit on the number of tags, but there is on the number of classes. There's a number of chart of accounts you can have and stuff like that. So you definitely want to pay attention to that when you're looking at it. So it looks like we have a question, so let's take a peek here. So Danette says, so should we create customers for grants and use tags and classes, or one or the other? The answer to that is yes and no. Depends on what you want to see. So as Anne said, for tax purposes, you have to try to know what your fundraising expenses were, your admin expenses are, and this, that, and the other thing. So you could still use classes for those and track your grants as a customer. And then you could still tie those expenses into those proper buckets. But that's a preference up to you guys. Eric, the link is on the training PowerPoint, which I have not sent to you guys yet. So you will get that at the end of the session when you guys get the recording, and you'll be able to see the YouTube video, be able to copy that link off of there and see the YouTube video. Any other questions about the reports, you know, how it plays in the classes and locations? And then obviously the grant tracking stuff we talked about. And some of this, I will warn you guys, when you get in to start creating grants as customers, it's going to be a little bit of a cleanup process for you as you're getting stuff situated. But I honestly, I like it because it, again, makes my classes not a million things, and I don't have to pull a massive report. You still have to dissect that report when you pull it and kind of go from there. Okay. So now I want to talk about the book review area that we talk about. So we are right now logged in as if we were primary owner of the nonprofit. This is what the executive director would see, dashboard wise and everything like that. Okay. The accountants see something different. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out here. And I'm going to see if our invitation worked. See if we can't accept this again. Because we have to be able to be in as an accountant in order to see this. Seeing if it lets me create a new firm, if it'll actually let invitation. Let's see if it's in here anyways, if we can see it. So let's go here. We need to use a different login. I'm gonna see if we can see it anyways. Nope, it's not. Yeah, that's the old one. Let's log back in. Let's see if we can try to invite. Invite me again and see if we can't get it to go. So again, under your gear icon here, manage users. We're gonna delete that invite. Try to invite the one. Again, wants a code again. And this one is 643-763. Okay, so it says it's been sent. So then now let's go back into my email here. We'll delete this one so we don't confuse ourselves. Yeah, we deleted that user. That's right. And it's not coming through. There it is. Okay. Perfect. So let's see if it'll let us do it this time. Nope. Okay, we're gonna skip this section and come back to it and see if QuickBooks fixes itself. Because as you can see, it is not liking me with it adding the accountant today. But we do need to be able to see that so that we can go. You can't see the book review module without being in the accountant portal. Okay, so let's talk about adding income software in here. So a lot of nonprofits, we use a lot of different softwares, okay, to track income. Big name in the area is Donor Perfect. It's the one I see most often. And so Donor Perfect can be integrated into QuickBooks. So over here, you can import data. You also have, I think it's under here, like different options. So these are just generic ones, but you could click find an app and you can search your industry on what your fund, Fundbox, any of these things that you might use, PayPal. Here's where you would integrate your Wix. I've had people ask me about that. But these are your connections. So it's this set of icons here that allows you to find your apps. So one of the apps, again, you could be looking for is going to be Donor Perfect. So I'm going to see if we can find it. Donor. Nope. So if it's one of these apps that you guys are using, and obviously this doesn't just apply to nonprofits, you can integrate apps into QuickBooks Online like Square and things like that, or if you're an Amazon-based business, it just depends. Okay, Wix again doesn't always just require to be nonprofit shop. Shopify, same thing. You can go through the process, and sometimes there's a fee associated with this, but if you click on it, it's going to show you a video on how to do it. Here's pricing if there is pricing. So this one is free. It's going to show you reviews, similar things, and then Q&A. Okay. So it gives you a brief description. And then obviously at the top, you would click Get App Now, and it's going to prompt you through the wizard to get this implemented on your software. Okay. Which requires you to log into your Shopify account. I don't have one, so we won't do it today. Log into your account with usernames and credentials and everything like that. Now, what we have found is that although these apps do this integration feature, that does not actually mean the data comes through all the time. And if it does come through, we're still trying to piece some of it together. So keep that in mind that not all integrations are perfect. You have to be very careful to monitor these integrations and make sure that they're not disconnecting at any point in time, like when QuickBooks pushes an update through, because you would notice your income is going to change or things are going to be off. So sometimes we find that it's easier to do the manual import instead of attaching the app. But know that these features are here. You can browse by category, browse by industry, based on what you're trying to accomplish. And again, then once you've implemented it here, you get another icon at the top here next to this one that will show you like what app you have integrated so that you can see it. Okay. So once you have that app integrated, you can see it here, then you can manage what's going on in that app. So it's nice to see. And obviously this is a big integration feature for us because if you're running donations through PayPal and all these types of things, having these integrations is going to be really important. Okay. To try to streamline your entry and be able to tie what's going into the bank account from where it's coming from, and then obviously making sure it's categorized in buckets. So it looks like we have a couple questions. So let me look at our questions here. Jean says, does the 5,000 go into a liability account or an income account? Jean, that would be depend on how you have it set up. It could go into either. So if you're getting fiscal funding for a following year, it would probably go into a liability account. If it's funding that you're going to have to spend in 30 days, it should go into an income account that you name whatever you name, but you get to set that up because it can go into either. Sarah says, what password manager do you use? I use LastPass. I do that for safety purposes for my team. I run my own organization. I have multiple people that work for me. I'm the only one that sees passwords from clients. I implement them in our software, and then all I have to do is change one password to lock an employee out of everything. Okay, so this is a long one. Danette says, while you're doing that, answer this at the end if you want. Our nonprofit brings in a majority of our funds by invoicing customers for services provided. And then she explains what they do. They are a deaf service company that provides interpretive services and support for the deaf community. Can you still use the nonprofit version? Does the terminology change? I've noticed since we changed to this version, the open invoices seem to be labeled as pledges. Is that okay, or do they need, or do I need to change something? So Danette, this is perfect, exactly what I'm trying to explain kind of in this process, and sadly mine is not showing that information. When you're in the nonprofit version, it shows you terms that you would use in the nonprofit world. So donors, pledges instead of customers and invoices, okay? Um, it is absolutely okay. It means the same thing. It's just making sure whoever's using it understands what that is. So there is no need to change that. If you are a nonprofit and want to be in the nonprofit world, even if you are offering services that you're being paid for, absolutely, you can still use it. That there is no problem for that. It's just that, yes, you will notice those little changes, and obviously because you're offering a service, to you it is an invoice versus a pledge of somebody just quote unquote donating, but it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they mean the same thing. So Lewis says, what if I have a Zephy app? Lewis, I don't know what Zephy is. You're welcome to look and see if it's in that list, browse by category. If not, it might be something you have to manually import. I'm happy to try to troubleshoot with you personally. So Mackenzie says, will you walk through a full donor program integration? Sadly, Mackenzie, I can't, but only because I don't have anybody's information that I can share on a recorded training to be able to do the full integration. I am happy to do an integration with you personally. If you want to reach out to me, we can troubleshoot that, but I can't teach it because I don't have my own program to integrate that would have any data in it that would be beneficial other than showing you the module here. Yes, I will send contact information at the end. Don't worry. Okay. So we're going to take our break just a smidge early. While I'm going to try to troubleshoot on our break as to getting the book review portal to open. Let's take a 15-minute break. So come back at 10:20. And we will continue going through our module. Feel free in this break to put any questions in the chat about anything we've covered. And I will start off coming back with going over those questions. And then we will saddle up for the last half of this training session. I will talk to you guys in 15 minutes. While we were on our break, I was unable to get the QuickBooks to show me the fun stuff of the book review. So I am actually logged in as a client. So I have strategically placed things over their name to save them from being on this recording, but able to allow us to see this book review portal. Okay. So when you're logged in as an accountant, over on this black navigation bar here, there is a book review tab. Okay. When you click on that book review tab, it opens this book review. Okay. Now this will have data pending on what you've set up, if you have integration and some of those other features that go into play here. Okay. So you'll have a transaction review. Obviously you can go into the account reconciliations, final review, and then wrap up. Okay. And again, it goes through and tells you things. when it's been done, if it's never been reconciled, when was the last reconciliation. Obviously, you can select accounts, you can create tasks on things that you can do here, and import as well. And then obviously you have the ability to request information from the client, and some of those types of things as well. And then you can do this on a monthly, quarterly, semi-annual, and annual basis. You could set up different types of reviews, and then again, tell it what the time frame is. Most of us close our books out once a month. We have a board meeting bi-monthly, whatever that might look like. And then, you're going to do budgets and quarterly numbers and all those types of things, or internal numbers for projects and stuff like that. So it really can kind of just depend on what you guys have going on. We'll tell you how to set this feature up. This is great because it's checks and balances. When it's been done, or if it's never been done, why has it never been done, right? The unreconciled transaction, so you know your risk here. You're going to know that stuff is closed every month. When you're getting reports, the data should be final. You're going to be able to know who did that data. So whoever's logged in as the accountant, whoever is the bookkeeper, that you would have to have accountant access again to see this portal, to have access to it and be able to work through it. Okay. Um, Honestly, it reminds everybody what needs to be done to close something out too, which is nice. And it will help you with issues and things that you have. And then, as you know, when you looked at just the transaction review, it tells you like, here's what you need to do before you can do this item, right? So yeah, so definitely a feature I recommend. And I recommend setting it up for your individual basis for your personal account. And then obviously once you go into like final review, then you'll be able to see like, pledges, how much it was, who was it to, if there's actions we need to do, edit, void, delete, any of those types of things, it kind of shows you that information as well. And then the wrap up report tells you that you need to prepare reports, which ones you need to do, send the packet, who you're sending it to, close the books. Again, these are all features to help streamline, especially if you're really into like, let's use QuickBooks reports. Let's not make actual manual data. There's room for mistakes with manual data and that type of thing. This report can really, really help you in doing this close and everything like that. And then again, you set it up. So still in the process of implementing this with a client that we're using, because it's something that we definitely want to use. And I want to be able to build the custom reports and be able to house some of the data in here along with their drive, along with emails going out to board members and, committees and things like that, pending what you're trying to do. Okay. And then while we were logged in here, I wanted to show you what it looked like if you had implemented an application. So again, if you click your little icon here, you'll see that it tells me what my apps are. So Donor Perfect is listed here. It is an app that we integrated, and again, something that you can find. But once you've done the integration, you'll see it here. You'll see that it's been connected and everything like that. And then where that data goes and what it does is dependent on how you guys map it out. Um, Donor Perfect, we found, is not seamless integration. There is manual work involved here. So it's not something that we think we're going to keep integrated. But again, I have done the integration. It can be done with any of the programs you're looking to use. And then again, some of them have fees and some of them don't. Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a second so I can get out of this and get back into our own QuickBooks file that we're using for training purposes. All right, you'll see me share my screen again. Okay, so we're back in our training here. So there is a module that should allow you to toggle between views. So if you click in here, you can switch from accountant view to business view, which in this case doesn't look any different. But I was hoping if I toggled into the accountant view that it would populate the book review, and it didn't do that. So that was like one of the workarounds we were trying to do. But I still don't, as you see here in this module, do not have that option here. So I don't know why. And then I tried to obviously accept our accountant invitation again. It didn't let me do it. So I'm not sure what is happening and why it's not, doing it with us, but at least we were able to show you the portal. Again, the PowerPoint has screenshots in it that you guys will get with the recording that tells you all the things we kind of briefly talked about. And then how you could set it up. And again, this I would just implement around what your best policy procedures are for month end close. If that's just that every month as an executive director, you get a P&L or a statement of cash flows and you get the detail of it. And then, you get some of those types of things. But obviously some of us get more high level reports of comparison reports and things like that. So you can build it to be customized for what you want to see at the end of each month. Okay. So we're going to talk about the tax prep a little bit. People have asked me about the tax prep and let's see here. There is like a tax prep tool inside of here that tells you kind of the things they're going to be looking for. So if you go here and you go to year-end filing, you'll see that it tells you like what you are and the reasons that you're doing it. And then you could download Tax Turbo if you're going to do it yourself. It's not something I'm going to do. But this is really the tax portal that they have. There is a tool inside of the accountant side, again, that plays into your month closeout, that you can have a tax tool in there that says prep for taxes, and it will allow you to do year-end task lists. So if there's things you adjust at the end of the year, documents. So let me pull up, because we already logged out of that file. Let me pull this up and I'll show you. So this is what the screen would look like. So you have year-end tasks, you can do documents to load. So if you get any tax documents, interest statements, those types of things, reviews and adjustments, obviously you'll see there's not a whole lot of data in here, but you have this option here, grouping of statements and then tax mapping. And then you can look at this. So this is a report, obviously, that you would send to your accountant or whoever's doing the tax prep. If it's you, awesome. Don't know how to do 990, so it's not my area of expertise. But again, this is an accountant tool that is given so that you can work directly with your accountant or whomever's doing it and be prepped and be able to see the difference between years and what changed and why, so that you know that there's an adjustment entry if you need to. And then again, print, export, accountant view only. You can see I put it here up at the top so that as a general user, you can't see it. Why QuickBooks Nonprofit has made these phenomenal tools for accountants and not made it viewable to the primary admin, I don't know. I really don't, because if you were the executive director and you're a primary admin, you would want to see this information, right? So I have no idea why it's only specific to accountants, but it is a really cool tool to be able to use. So I definitely recommend doing that, okay? Any questions about the book review or the tax prep portal? Again, these are just specialty features that they have designed. These two features are not able to be done in QuickBooks Online that's not for nonprofits, just so we're on the same page. These are only features in your guys' specific software. Okay, so no questions. And again, as you can see, this is the PowerPoint I told you guys I was working on. So you will get a copy of this at the end, okay? So a lot of times we talk about, we've had a lot of questions on today's call about like sales and the terminology of invoices versus pledges, or customers versus donors. An invoice can be a pledge. It's the same thing. Obviously, most of the time when you're a nonprofit, you're not really creating invoices for services. You're getting more donations or sponsorships for an event that's going on, and that's obviously how you generate money. So it really does mean the same thing. So just because it says pledges versus invoice does not mean you're in the wrong subscription. That is something that you see internally when you go to the invoice or pledge. It doesn't look any different. This one says to start setting up payment processing, which we're not going to do, obviously. So yeah, so it might say pledge versus invoice here. You can change that by managing your template up here and doing some customization, but the template itself is the same. Okay. Now I do have sometimes where people are like, hey, can you create me a template so I always know where I'm go to create an invoice for this event, right? Or a pledge for this event, right? So you can do that as well. You can set it up where they use specific templates for specific things. That's up to you. That's a customization feature as well. And I believe it goes down here under scheduling. There is make it reoccurring. Where did I get? Took me to the wrong spot, guys. Sorry. So create an invoice, same process we were just in, obviously just getting back into it. We're going to ignore this for now because we're not setting any of that up. Apparently wants us to set it up. Okay, so it's not going to let me in the portal without setting it up. But I do not believe under accounts and settings we set up to take payments in here. So let me double check. Oh, it does think we have a merchant ID number. Huh, we don't, so. It must have did it when we did our wizard. So we definitely have to make sure that that's why it's prompting for all of these things. Is if you go up in here in payments and then it'll tell you have a merchant ID. And then how you manage this, it takes you to another portal. And you can see your tax forms if you ever needed them, transactions, fees, all statements. And then obviously you have all these tools here. This is an additional fee. So just so you guys know, if you use processing through QuickBooks, it is additional fee. And as you can see, there's PCI compliance options in here that you would have to do too. And obviously we didn't set any of this up because it's not, usually this is not something we actually implement. I would venture to bet based on this is something you guys are given in the monthly fee. And then obviously you have to remember to set it up, which it looks like QuickBooks is going to make you do to be able to do pledges and invoices. So clicks out of here. So if that's the case, then we'll just go through their wizard here. That way they know that it's here. And again, you can turn these on and off if you don't want people to pay that way. So under design, you can do other templates. And I want to leave without saving to open this other template. So this is the standard and you can create a new one. So if I create a template for something that we're offering, you can edit the name of it. So this, say this is our fall fundraiser template. Then you can change it up on what you want it to look like. Logo, colors. So there's not a ton of customization here, but there is some. And then you would hit done. And then if we refresh here, we should see both templates there now. Yep, so you'll see. And you can make it a default and whatever else. So then if you go back into sales and you go back to invoices, again, this plays into whether you want to say pledges or invoice if you're worried about that. And you create invoice. You can select which template. The standard one or the one we just created. To make sure that then it formats really. Okay, so you can do that. Again, this is just because everybody seems to be, really questioning that, and so we want to make sure we have that. And then you'll see things say hidden on them. That means you see them, but the client does not when they get their PDF version or printed out version. They don't see the items that are hidden. Again, these are just internal factors that help generate the reports the way we want to see them. I'm going to leave without saving because we don't need to create that invoice. Again, down here, you can do, more options than just creating an invoice. You can obviously like go to your customers or donors, and then, down here, you can just, if we click into one here, new transaction, you can just do a sales receipt, credit memo. There's delayed charges. So you can change the date. So like if you're going to have a charge for them, but it's not due yet, but you want to have it for forecasting, or the money's coming, the check just hasn't arrived, those types of things. You can delay credits and delay charges based on dates, but then put the data in while it's top of mind. Again, glass here, tags here, whatever else. And then I know that we've kind of toggled back and forth based on questions here about classes versus tags. So if you go up into this gear icon and you go to your list, this is where you see classes and where you'll see tags. And if you click tags, if you start tagging transactions, again, you can pull a list of items that are tagged to whatever you created the tag. So if the tag was the grant, you can pull a report again based on everything tagged to that grant. That data comes out in a report. You know what? Let me tag a couple things so that you guys can see them. Make it easy here. So again, if you click on a transaction, you have to open it and tag it. I don't need it in a group. So hit add. And I'm going to pick another one. And again, tag it. So then again, if we go back up here to our list, and we go to tags, now we'll see some tags in here, and you'll see the transactions here, and you can run a report. Shows you here. So from a reporting perspective versus pulling a report by customer, you can pull it by tags. And again, if you've got everything tagged, properly tagged, now there's no warnings if you don't tag. So that's can be a downfall sometimes. You can again get a very detailed report for a project that you would have created into a tags, or a grant you would be tracking by tags, or anything along those lines, and take this snippet of data for the one item that's tagged in it, right? And add them together if you have multiple grants running at the same time. Now, if you click into a transaction, big deal for nonprofits is receipts. So you can upload an attachment to tie out this to prove why this was tagged to a grant, or vice versa, or why it was tagged to a program, and then obviously who made the charge, because obviously we know in nonprofits a big thing we struggle with is making sure that we are getting all the receipts and the data is all tying through to where it should go, as far as making sure that everybody's turning everything in, because we might share a credit card and those types of things. There are programs now that people are starting to learn about that will help you have one credit card and multiple users and require receipts, and there's integration features and things like that. It just depends on what you're trying to do in order if that's going to work for your organization or not. And again, you can do attachments in a couple different ways. If you open a transaction here, add attachment. Now, if you use tags, when you go to pull reports down here, and you pull this report, I don't believe, let me see if there is an option. Tags is not an option, like to pull it and see it in your main report. So you can only pull reports by tags based on your list item. And then you can create groups, which I didn't do any of that, but we can create groups. So there's no limit on tags. That's a big deal when we have limits on number of classes and limits on number of accounts. So you have 40 classes, that's all you can create. We created 6 of them in training today, okay? And then if you go into your list and you look at your chart of accounts, you have 250 accounts. So that's why the tags can come into play and be handy because you don't get capped where if you're trying to fine tune too much detail, you might run out of the ability to have that. Now you can upgrade your subscription and get more. It looks like we have a question, so let's take a peek. Says, can you show tracking by employees' best practices? I need a little more detail here. So are you talking about if they have a credit card and you're tracking what they're spending on that credit card? Or what exactly are you trying to see from an employee perspective? Or are you looking at time tracking for like payroll? And sadly, it says anonymous attendee, so I don't know who asked. So says how employees can put expenses in QuickBooks so they get reimbursed. Trying to think. This isn't something I would have the employee do inside of QuickBooks because really the reimbursement expenses should be categorized at the time the reimbursement is done, whether it's through payroll or on a check. And so they wouldn't be cutting their own check, right? So I would say you probably want to do an expense report, have them attach receipts and then have them turn that in. And then you go through your procedure of, you know, how you go through reimbursement, whether it's you got to review everything, then get it approved, then cut a check. So it takes a week, 2 weeks, whatever that system looks like. Or if you're giving it to them on payroll, again, you still have a review process. But I would not have them put it directly into QuickBooks because that could get lost in translation, and then they also could categorize something not properly. And again, if you're going to cut them a check, you need to make sure what they're entering in QuickBooks would tie through to that transaction so you don't have duplicate expenses. Does that make sense? You can add users and trap's not the right word, and control their ability to see certain things. That being said, again, you're still relying on them to categorize the expenses properly in QuickBooks. And then you still need to then be able to tie what they've put into QuickBooks to the check or how you're reimbursing them. So there's an area there that I would not personally probably do because it could be an area that there would be duplicate data or things miscategorized, misclassified, or mistagged. So like if you go into manage users here, maybe if it's going to go, you can add a user. So you only have 5 users in this subscription. And then you can select the role here. So all access, no access, receivables access, payable access, only customers and vendors, in-house accountant, company admin, time tracking, be able to review reports, take payments, and that's it. So on here, it doesn't really specify that there's anything for just expenses. I'm sure one of these gives you, payables is obviously would be expenses, would be my guess. Bill payments, vendor credits, credit card expenses, print checks. So they have access to receipts. That would be the way I would venture to bet. But yeah, I would be nervous about them not categorizing properly. It says you don't add them through expenses. So how would they put them in then? I'm not familiar with this tool, so I'm interested now. Anytime I've seen a client put an expense in or a customer have an employee put an expense in, it shows up either under a receipt tab here because they've scanned something in. But if you have more than one employee doing it, I don't think it tells you who did the receipt. It just says that there was a receipt scanned in. So it would be hard to differentiate. If it's something you want to reach out to individually and we can look at it on your side. Yeah, if you want to share that QuickBooks video, we could take a look at it and see, because it's not something that I'm familiar with on the individual basis for sure. Michelle asks, if we scan and upload receipts, do we still need paper copies? The answer is no. If you have them somewhere, you don't have to keep the papers. It's just, and honestly, a lot of the receipt is on that heat transfer paper, so it fades very quickly. It's just about having the documentation somewhere. I encourage you to load as much into QuickBooks to tie to transactions so that in 10 years when somebody else looks at it, they know what it is. I leave lots of memos and lots of notes. Any other questions right now? Okay, perfect. So we only have a couple more sections we're going to cover, one of which is going to be the projects. So we talked about how we can make budgets and micro budgets, and obviously you could do projects that play in. So if you click on the projects module here, projects can be done whether you're in regular QuickBooks or nonprofit QuickBooks. So it is done on both sides. We want to create a project. So a project, again, this could be a program you're running, a fall fundraiser. If there's a customer that you need to do it with, you don't have to have an email address. You can pick a start date. So say this started on September, but it's not going to end till November. And then you can put notes on this. This is our fall gala sponsors. Okay. And then if you want an address for this, you click this and you can put an address. I don't need one, so I'm just going to hit save. So then you can monitor this based on income and cost and see what your profit margin is. And then again, from the inside the project, you can do something that click into here and it's going to take us to our invoice screen. It already puts a project or customer in place. Again, you can go down here and pick your design and make sure you're in the proper template. Again, things that are hidden. You can still tag, you can still do classes, but it will tie this back. So then if we create an invoice, and I'm just going to do a random one so it shows. And I'm going to hit save, close. So it closes this. Now you'll see there's an income here. And again, anything would be listed here that you would have. You would be able to see transactions. So you can mark things paid from inside the project too, just like you can if you're doing a normal invoice or pledge, okay? Then again, hours, expenses, and bills. So a lot of times as nonprofits, we enter bills and we pay bills, whether we use a bill pay software or not. And so we would enter a bill and you can see that it already has the customer and project put in for you. This tab will populate as long as you have a project that's open, so you can select wherever it goes. So if you have an invoice you get, a bill you get that you need to pay, that's for more than one project going on at a time, you can select dollar amount that goes to one project and then change the second line item to a different project and put the dollar amount there, and then still have one total bill that shows a total dollar amount here with a bill number. And again, if you create something, then obviously it's going to be here. So then it would take your income minus your costs and tell you what that project was profitable. Obviously, attachments, upload anything. To be honest, you might even be able to use a project to talk about reimbursement for employees if you want to have them load the information that way. It's another option for some of those types of things. Obviously, you can create a new project, manage a project, set cost rates, and then obviously just click on it to open it back up. You can put more detail in it if you need to. You can pull reports by just this project. Again, it's another section of all the things that we do as nonprofits that we might want to see. I usually use projects for programs that we're running. So a lot of the times we always are like, well, we get money for our programs through, our daily or our annual subscriptions and that type of thing. And then we look at the programs, and when we put all the program costs together, we're in the red. Right. So sometimes we want to know, well, is that program really beneficial for us to run? As a nonprofit, we don't mind being in the red because we need to spend the money because we probably have a grant that would tie through it. But is it really worth running? Like, how much of it is it eating in our costs? And so these are things that you can use to help visualize some of those things without doing a ton of extra work. Now, if you're tying it to a project in here, it's still going to show on your main budget, and it's still going to show on your P&L. It's not just only going to show in this project. You are actually putting things in QuickBooks that are going to populate on these reports. Okay. And then if you use the time tracking, again, you can set that up and go over how much time is spent on each project. Again, that's an internal thing on what you would want to see. Okay. Looks like we have a couple questions. Mackenzie said, is there a way to set up automatic reports to email to people that aren't QuickBooks users? Mackenzie, let me think about this. If we go to reports, I know you can port them down as PDFs. Oh, well, you can email right here. That was not an email, right? Email? Oh, this is just to print or email. So if you click email, so yeah, you can. And it gives you a generic message on who sent it. So if you open up the report, whichever one you want to send, 90% of the reports have this bucket right here. And you click the mail, and then at the bottom here, next to where it says print and save PDF, you click email again, and then it will send them. It's a manual process. It doesn't look like there's any way to set it up like to reoccur month after month. And I don't know if once you set up an email address in here, if it's going to keep that email address or not. I would probably venture to bet probably not. So it looks like it's just as manual to do that as it might be for you to download it as a PDF and attach it to an email. Mackenzie, yes, the time tracking is an additional fee. I don't know if inside of the projects that technically is gonna be. So let's get in this project. Let's click on. Oops. Let me get out of this one. If this is gonna prompt us through the subscription that you actually do. There's a time tracking software that QuickBooks uses. It's called T-Sheets. And T-Sheets is an additional fee per people that are registered to use it. However, I didn't know if you could manually do it inside of QuickBooks underneath the projects, but I think maybe not. Based on the fact that it won't load. So I would say the answer then is yes, the timekeeping is an additional cost. Beverly said, have hackers ever compromised QuickBooks? I actually would not know that. And I don't know that QuickBooks would ever disclose that. It is a web-based platform, so as you guys can see, sometimes it has its quirks where we aren't able to add an accountant right now and a couple other things. I would say probably in a couple hours it'll be fine. They are obviously constantly updating it and growing it, and some days it runs slow and some days it runs fine. I mean, it's any web-based platform. But as far as if hackers got into it, I wouldn't know, and I doubt that QuickBooks would disclose that information unless required. Okay. So then we're going to talk about the last thing, which is just looking at our dashboard here. So now that we've got some data in here, and we're way ahead of schedule, guys, so I apologize. I feel like I talked way too fast maybe, but inside of here you have, a cash flow bucket that now that you'll see we have some of the invoices created, and then you have a planning bucket. This cash flow and home are normally there. The planner is not necessarily something that's always on the QuickBooks Online regular version. This is something that you guys again get, and it's to track your money, know where it's coming, and make smarter choices. And then obviously you can start this planner and it's going to walk you through the wizard. So a lot of times what's really cool about this planner is that most nonprofits are like, oh my gosh, I really want to find graphs and pie charts and things that I can show to my board without giving them all the nitty-gritty data, because they just want to see where the money's coming from and where the money's being spent in a grand scheme of things. So we take all this detail that we want to see, which is based on grants, expenditures, overhead, and all these other things. And really they want to see, well, how much did we generate and how much did we spend, total numbers. So sometimes the planner helps with that because you can see where the data is coming. You can download the report. It is a chart, obviously. You can switch it to money in, money out. You can make it a line graph, so you've got a couple options that they create as you're building your QuickBooks. Now, we don't have a ton of stuff in here. So sadly, it's not doesn't have a ton of data, but a lot of times you want to look at this. Like if we see that money in and money out, we look really good this month, right? A lot of money in because we didn't put any expenses in, but if for some reason we look bad, more money out than money coming in, we need to know why. And those would create questions. You can do the same thing with, again, projects and stuff like that with showing the charts without having to manually create it. Okay. And you can edit these things to set a threshold for certain things. You can link specific accounts if you're trying to monitor certain things like that. And then you can obviously follow the wizard as you're learning to use it. And then you can download the report again, filter it, add items, you have some customization there to then generate stuff here. So nonprofits, we like to look at data. We like to make sure the data is in the proper buckets. We like to make sure that we're making money and we're spending the money we're making, and obviously taking advantage of all that stuff. So this is just another feature that we have that allows us to kind of go through some of those things. Now it looks like we have a couple questions. Anne said, would you recommend backing up QuickBooks Online file? Does QuickBooks Online have a backup feature or backup to Google Drive? There is no backup on QuickBooks Online because it is a web-based platform. You can port down data in Excel format that could go into a Google Drive. But there is no backup like you think with desktop where you put it on a memory stick or you put it in the cloud. Like it's housed in the cloud, so it's supposedly the safest it can be. And then the only way to do it is like you can click into your gear icon and you can export data. But even if you export data, you're telling it the pieces you want to export, and it's just going to be a list. Says, can you recommend a user access level for someone in development director role? What are they going to have need to have access to, Mackenzie? Mackenzie, did you hear me? What would they need to have access to? That would be how we determine the user access. Because basically under the managed users, like if you hit edit, hold on. Let's add a user, and just when you select the roles down here, they could look at like, you can view and see what they have access to. Partial access, no access, no access. So you'd have to look at each individual user, and based on the accesses given, what would pertain to what you need her to be able to see. Mackenzie asks, is there an appropriate reconciliation between the donor database and QuickBooks? So there's double sides to this, Mackenzie. So yes and no. So no, there's no like you reconcile what's being synced into the database, okay? But you should be tying everything that's being synced into the database to a deposit within the bank account. And so if you're reconciling your bank account and then you're pulling your statement of cash flows report and you're looking at your revenue numbers, and then you pull that report out of your donor database, and the data should tie out, like the donation, all the income should match almost perfectly if you're putting everything in your donor database, okay? And then as long as it's tying through and you're matching stuff to the deposits, then that should be within a couple $100, which would show on your balance sheet or your financial stability statement. That would tell you you're within a couple $100 of what would be considered like I don't know if it's going to call it, depends on what donor database you use. I don't know if it's going to go into undeposited funds or if it's going to sit as just an other asset. There should be like no money in that account ever, basically. So money comes into that account. When it comes to the bank account, it comes out of that account, which zeros that account. And so those are the two check safes, making sure that when you pull your financial statement, that the income matches what's in your donor database, everything's tying to the bank account, and there's nothing sitting on your balance sheet. And Mackenzie, if that was confusing, I apologize. And if you need additional help, ask me again, okay? Danette says a director of development would use things like Zephy to help raise funds. And then it says a director of development might need the ability to see reports for fundraising projects or something similar if they are meeting their targets. Okay. So based on that, I would venture to bet you're going to need, let's see here, if you only view company reports. I don't know what Zephy is, Danette, but if they're only going to need to see reports, then it looks like you probably could just give them view company report access only. Or if they need to deal with vendors and customers because they might need to create an invoice or something like that, it might be that this is the access you want to give them, where they then can still see reports. I always would tell people when you're looking at trying out accesses, give them less access and then work your way up to granting more access because they don't know what they don't know what they need until they start to get in there and look. And so you don't want them looking at things that they don't need. So I start with less and then have them say, well, it said I don't have access to that. And then you raise the next level or try the next one that gives them a little bit more access and kind of go from there. Same purpose goes with desktop. Start with less, give them more as needed or requested. Sadly, there's no right or wrong answer on that access. It's obviously a personal thing that you give out. Okay, guys, well, that is my to-do list for our training today. So we are done way early. So I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to ask any additional questions that might be more individualized, or you can go back to any of the information that we've covered during this class. I'm going to pull up my contact information so that you guys have that. And then we will also, this is our last class of the session. So as I tell everybody in the past, if you have anything that you guys need on an individual basis as you're learning and walking through this stuff and looking at the training PowerPoints later on, just let me know and we can always touch base together. And obviously I can give you guys some additional help if need be. It's more of a preference on yourself and what your guys' needs are, but sometimes it's easier when we're doing more of the individual basis stuff. And then, so here is my contact information, as I know a couple of you had asked for that. And then it looks like we are getting some questions, so I'll go back into our chat here. The app for password keeping is called LastPass. And again, feel free to put any additional questions you have in the Q&A. Guys, I was just looking back through the chat and I know I had mentioned earlier about whether TechSoup had the QuickBooks Online discounted for nonprofits, and one of the people in the class says they do. So if you do use TechSoup, feel free to make sure that you're paying the right dollar amount for the subscription, because obviously we want to save every penny we can on this. Honestly, nonprofits used to get QuickBooks Online for free. So the fact that we have to pay for it is a new thing, and that's obviously because they've built some of these custom modules for us. You know, the book review and tax prep and stuff like that. Perfect. I don't think we have any other questions. So guys, Gwen will be sending out the recording and then the PowerPoint, which I will get over to them here in just a few minutes. And then as you guys are going through it, if you have any questions, let me know. And then if you need anything in the future, I'm sure we will run another QuickBooks training session here as we've gotten tons of good feedback on these training sessions, and I will keep learning more and more about this nonprofit portal and see if we can't make this training even longer. Obviously, some of what we cover in the first 3 classes pertains to nonprofits just without your terminology. So this is just specialty features as this last class for the nonprofits.
So Ann, this is John Ripple from Canton Score. Really appreciate you putting on these series of 4 workshops for us, and we look forward to having you back and present this at a later date.
Awesome. Sounds good, guys. You guys have a good one.
Okay, so
Thanks
with
a
that,
lot,
we'll
Ann.
we'll
So long.
conclude the webinar.